name is Sam Pane. I'm a wood turner from Omaha, Nebraska. And today we're going to take a little bit of a detour from some of the other projects that you may have seen. And instead of working with wood, we're going to work with some old bullet shell casings, and we're going to turn out a nice bullet pen. It uses a 308 and a 30-06. I put some copper hardware on there to really kind of give it a nice polished look. Now, I found these designs in the magazine Wood Turning Design, and I followed those steps. If you follow them, or if you just watch this, you too should have no problem making your first bullet. Alright, the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you have the materials that are necessary. I use a designer pen set, and I use a slimline pen set, and we'll take a look at those in a little bit. As far as the raw materials for the blanks go, you need two bullet casings. I have a 308 right here and a 30-06, and both of them have the primer already knocked out. The last thing you want to do is put this on the lathe and then try and drill it out. Now, that hole's obviously not going to be big enough for a 7mm drill, for 7mm tube, so I'm going to put it here in my chuck and I'm going to drill it out. You don't want to tighten it up too much, because if you tighten it up too much, you're going to mar that brass, which is pretty soft metal. So you just get a little bit on there. You get that with experience. I have a 5/32 inch drill bit in my chuck right here, and that is a little bit too large for a 7mm tube, but I'll show you a little trick in a minute here about how to get that so it fits in there really snugly. So with the lathe turned on its slowest speed, get yourself locked down, and we're going to drill out that tube. Just like that, you've got your first brass tube that's drilled out with the 5/32 inch hole. We'll do that with both the tubes, and we'll go ahead and go to the next step. Now that we have the shell casings drilled out, let's go ahead and put the brass tubes in. Now, like I said, the brass tubes are not going to fit in there snugly yet. What I do with that is I put on a little bit of electrician's shrink wrap. The shrink wrap, when you heat it up, it'll clam itself right on there really tightly. Now, usually you'd use a heat gun for this, but I don't have a heat gun. So the best thing that I found is a kitchen torch. You find these at any kitchen supply stores. Usually it's used for creme brulee. I use mine for wood turning. So what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of the shrink wrap right down on each end, just about a 1/4 inch or so. And it slides right on down. And let's get the torch going. You really want to hold that tube in a pair of pliers because it gets warm pretty fast. And we'll just torch it right on there. Once this cools down a little bit, we will be able to go ahead and insert it with a little bit of epoxy. That's going to be our next step. Kind of quickly, because we've got to get these brass tubes that have the shrink wrap on the end into the shell casings. So I've already got some 5-minute epoxy mixed up right here. I put a generous amount on both ends of them, because that way it'll make up for a little bit of loose, a little bit of wiggle room inside there. Put it on the tube. Put it in the casing. Doesn't really matter which end you start with. And let's slide this guy right on through. To twist it, spread it around. Get a little bit more on the other end. And in that goes. Now, you're going to get some squeeze out there, and that's completely okay, because you're going to take care of that with a pen mill here in just a little bit. So we've got one more tube here and one more shell casing. We'll take care of that just like we did with this one. We've got the brass tubes epoxied in, and now we just got to clean up that end. And the easiest way to clean up the edge there, both spots, is going to be with a pen mill that I just have chucked into a drill. So all you do is just put it right in there. Clean out the epoxy, and you can see it starting to come out. And we're going to actually shorten down a little bit of the brass at each end. So we'll give that a try. You have one edge that gets cleaned up. Do the same thing right here on the back. end up doing this with both parts of the barrel, and we'll have a pen that's ready to go onto the lathe and get turned. Now that everything is set, we can move to the lathe right here. So what I'm going to do is I've got my mandrel already in here. It's just a standard wood turning pen maker's mandrel. And I'm going to go ahead and put the shell casings on that mandrel with a couple of spacers in between, just regular slimline spacers. I usually put them on the machine going nose to nose like this. It just makes things a little bit easier when I sand it. So I'll put the long barrel on first. That's the 30-06. Put a spacer in there. Put the 308 right like that. Put a couple more spacers so I can get my brass wheel on there. We'll pull up the tailstock, and we're ready to go. The bullet casings, they are a little bit beaten up when I get them. So the way I take care of it and polish them up is I use some regular sandpaper. And I just use the same sandpaper that I use when I'm turning wood, and I run through my grits. I've had pretty decent success with that. So I'm going to start with some 150. I move to 220, 320, 500, and then I use a little bit of some triple E polish, and that really does a nice job on the pen. So I'm going to get going here, and let's get this thing sanded. Pull the sleeves so that they don't get caught. You can already start to see the scratch pattern in there, but each layer will take care of that. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of the 220, the 320, and the 500. With each successive grit, my pens get a little bit shinier. That brass gets everything sanded. It's down to 500 grit. That's a good spot. My next place is to go with some triple E polish. Smells really bad, but it does a nice job getting all the finishing scratches out. So I'm going to go ahead and smear just a little tiny bit right there on my finger, and then I'm going to rub that all along the brass tubes. So I've got my lathe turning at about 2600 RPM. I'm going to start polishing the rest of this up. Might be some flying back at me, so I stand aside, let it run for a sec, and now I'm going to hit it with the paper towel. Now that all the turning is done, and all the polishing, I'm going to pull this off the mandrel, and I'm going to put in the clip. Now, what I like to use for the clip on these bullet pens is to go with some copper hardware. It's not that much more expensive, and it has a great look. It looks like a bullet should look. So I'm going to start back here with the clip part, and I'm going to put that in the short end of the bullet. I'll put that right there in my pen press, and we'll squeeze these guys together. One down. Let's do the nose. Putting in the clutch mechanism back here is a little bit trial and error. I've already got the tip on, so I'm going to go back to my pen press, give it a little bit more of a squeeze. And we'll try out the ink to see if it fits. Alright, well I have the ink dialed in just about right, so now the last part is a little bit of assembly. Take the 308 part, press it right in there, and just like that, you've got yourself a beautiful bullet pen. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed and learned.